We're all set and ready to go. So thank you guys so much for joining us for today's webinar on how to run your first peer-to-peer campaign. I run marketing here at Cosvox, and prior to that, I actually spent 6 years in many of your shoes, planning fundraising campaigns, helping an organization grow their funding, acquiring new donors. That was all kind of my day-to-day tasks. And so I understand how difficult that is. I understand how hard it is to do that on limited budget with not many staff. And so what I've tried to do is take the idea of running a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign and the concept and kind of everything it the greatness that it sounds like it's a good idea, and tried to distill it down so that it's practical. It's really going to design, or today's presentation is really designed to help you successfully run a peer-to-peer campaign. And so hopefully you'll see that throughout today's presentation. Like I said, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to drop those in the questions pane. We'll dive into those as we go throughout today's presentation or during the live Q&A at the end of the presentation. This is just a little overview, sharing where we're going today so that you can kind of follow along. We're going to first start off by talking about fundraising in today's connected world, how that really goes down, what that looks like, what's changed, and how do you really navigate that as a fundraiser leading your organization to inspire, activate, and rally your supporters. We're also going to be talking about how and why peer-to-peer works. Then we're going to dive into the meat of the presentation where we talk about the 5 steps you need to know as you run a successful campaign. Then towards the end, we're going to have a live Q&A so that you can ask your questions. You can really take your organization's needs and really express those out. And I would love to be an asset to you and share some thoughts I have that might be helpful for you as you think about using peer-to-peer fundraising in your organization. And then if you're interested, Rob, the CEO of Cosvox, is going to be joining us at the end of the presentation today and sharing a live demo of Cosvox's peer-to-peer fundraising tools. Our fundraising tools are actually designed to help you easily create, manage, and promote your fundraising campaigns without more staff or increasing your budget. He's going to help you take all the practical advice we talk about today and actually implement it using our fundraising tools. So if you're interested, you can definitely stick around to enjoy that. Rob's going to be joining us probably in about 40 minutes or so that he can come on and really share how to turn today's practical tips into action using our online fundraising tools. So as we dive in, we're really thinking about today's world that we fundraise in. And that world you fundraise in has really changed. But it's not just that. The world you fundraise in is actually rapidly changing all the time. And the question we get asked every day here at Cosvox is, how do you actually navigate that? How do you keep up? Why is the world changing? How am I supposed to respond to all the different changes? It seems as though there's a new shiny object everywhere you look. It's harder and harder to connect with your supporters, even the ones that are loyal to you, because everyone is kind of going to a privatized feed. There's not general communication channels anymore that you can really drive into and expect people that care and love about your cause to really see it. And so how do you really navigate that? And so one thing we've thought a lot about here at Cosvox is that this new world, really the ever-changing world that we live in today, requires you to rethink how you go about fundraising. The world we live in today is digital first. It's always connected. It's relationship and recommendation driven. And there's an increased competition for your supporters' attention and your community's attention. However, we believe there's good news in all of this. In the previous age, where it was more about direct response, it was all kind of mass media, the fundraising strategy was all based on renting attention. And what I mean by that is you might have to purchase lists, you might have to run advertising, you might run direct mail campaigns off of paid lists, you might do TV ads. When digital came around originally, we would buy email lists and blast out and expect that by renting someone's attention, we could get a 5%, 3 to 5% response rate, and that was good enough. But that world actually the advantage was to larger organizations that had budget and reach. And in today's ecosystem, in this kind of ever changing, privatized feed, recommendations, relationships, digital first, always connected, increased competition for your attention, it's about building relationships. So this means that your story matters. It matters what people say about you more than what you say about you. It's about leveraging digital tools like social media, but other tools that connect our world. So, how do you really tap into that? How do you create an advantage by creating a group of loyal advocates for your organization? And really, the advantage now is for organizations that can build trust and loyalty. And so, this is great news for small and medium sized organizations, and even refreshing for me who used to do fundraising, because I knew how hard it was to compete in a world that was all about budget and reach. And when you rented attention, that means when you stopped paying for it, you had nothing to show except for those that you've convinced, which was a very small number, to buy into your cause. And so today's world is all about building relationships, which I believe is actually the core of fundraising. And so this is good news. And what's great about this, I love this quote by Seth Godin. He says, some organizations will thrive from this increased chaos, some will be unprepared, and some will merely fight it and lose. Here at Cosvox, we're all about helping good things flourish. All the causes that you guys are fighting for matter to people, and you're trying to make our world a better place. And we want you to help you be an organization that thrives in this new environment of increased chaos that we're all fundraising in. So the question then becomes is how and why does peer-to-peer fundraising work? And the hint is that peer-to-peer fundraising is actually foundationally built on relationships. And so if we go back here and look at what fundraising is all about in today's ecosystem, it's about building relationships. And so we feel that peer-to-peer fundraising really at its core has an advantage as a strategy or as a methodology on how you run your fundraising campaigns in today's ever-changing world that we all live in. And we also see it as kind of the way fundraising should be. Fundraising was never intended to look like this. And so this is more of kind of the direct response fundraising strategy that many of us grew up learning as we, climb the ladder within nonprofits and fundraising, is we learn that, hey, we need to just get an audience and we need to blast them. We even call things email blast or direct mail blast. That methodology is not how fundraising was ever intended to look like. And so what we believe is that with people fundraising, or peer-to-peer fundraising, as some people call it, it's more about personal. It's personal, it's human, and delightful for everyone. And so it's much more about building friends up around your organization and allowing them to share and inspire others to join and be a part of your cause. And that's the foundation of what peer-to-peer fundraising is all about. And so how does that actually work? So what are the fundamentals? So this graphic is really just trying to simplify how this actually works, because some definitions that we've seen confuses this as though we're just saying, hey, release fundraising to your community and let them fundraise for the cause however they see fit. And that's not really what we're recommending. What we're saying is that you as the fundraiser actually now create opportunities for your community to get involved. And so that activates a fundraiser to become an advocate for your organization so they can actually ask for funding from their friends, from their community, and then pass that back on to your organization. And so what we've done here at Cosvox specifically is actually made this easier. So our fundraising tools help facilitate this without your fundraisers ever having to touch the money. And so when they go out and advocate for your cause, the money actually goes straight to your organization to ensure that you get it sooner so that you can invest in the change that you're trying to make in our communities. The other great fact about peer-to-peer fundraising is that 85% of donors actually prefer peer-to-peer fundraising. They prefer to being asked by friends and family to make a donation. And what we when we really sat down as a team to try to think through how do we explain the value of peer to peer, and then how do we translate that into a real plan, kind of a lens that you're going to apply to all of your fundraising, what we came up with was what we call the people fundraising way. And so we believe that any nonprofit can really adopt this three-step methodology to turn their community into advocates. And again, it's all built on relationships, which are human, personal, and story driven. And so as we think through how we're going to plan and run an effective peer to peer fundraising campaign, this idea, this people fundraising way, is at the core of the process. You want to take your community, those are people that are interested in the cause that or change that you're trying to make in our world, and you inspire them with things like story and social media and videos. And then you turn them into supporters and activate them via campaigns, peer to peer, and events. They turn into fundraisers, and then your job is to rally them around your cause so they become advocates and can inspire others in your community to become supporters. And so, this people fundraising way, we believe, is a core aspect of running a successful peer to peer fundraising campaign. I love this story. Maria and Lauren are the founders of the Motherhood Collective. It's an organization that really thinks well about how they can help a mother from conception to childhood or to basically parenting, how they can really support the mother throughout that whole process in a holistic way. And so they actually had a community of supporters, a community of moms in their local community that they're speaking into, they're sharing with, they're inspiring in a way by their mission, by their personal stories as moms. The challenge is they could only typically turn that into volunteerism. And volunteerism in the practical way, where they were actually lending their hands to support the programs of this organization. And that was essential. What they didn't know how to do was actually how to inspire their community, activate them, and then rallying them for the sake of fundraising. And so they were able to use CosVox's methodology and our fundraising platform to be able to run a peer to peer fundraising campaign and actually activate 23 of their community members to raise money on behalf of the organization. And this wasn't just 23 people that became supporters. They actually had 104 people become supporters. They had 23 people become advocates, where they were actually inspiring others in the community to get involved. One of those advocates was Alicia. And so Alicia actually came alongside. She was a beneficiary of the Motherhood Collective's programs. And what she did was say, hey, this work that the Motherhood Collective is all about, which is maternal health, is important. And here's why, in my own words. And she was able to inspire 7 people from the community to get behind her and support this cause. And the Motherhood Collective was able to get that money directly so that could help support more programs to serve women. This organization was able to raise just over $6,000 during their first campaign. This year, they actually raised almost $25,000. And so it's incredible to see how this is actually helping to build a sustainable supporter network for your cause. And so you're not starting back over at zero. So it's about relationship building. It's not about renting attention. And that is the power of peer-to-peer fundraising. We're going to spend the next 15 minutes now really applying that methodology. So now you kind of see, where we've been. The world we live on has fundamentally shifted, and it continues to shift. And so how do we actually fundraise effectively in that environment? And really what it's all about was, before it was all about budget and reach, and now it's about trust and loyalty that serves the purpose of building relationships. And so the more relationships your organization can generate, not how much attention you can rent, is how you can be a successful organization in today's environment. Then we really talked about the methodology. We kind of shared, it's about inspiring your community, activating your supporters, and rallying fundraisers to become advocates for your cause so that they can inspire your community to get involved. And then we talked about how the Motherhood Collective really was able to put all these pieces together. And so they were able to inspire a community of people, 104 people to get behind their cause that year. I think it was more than that the year after, and raised $6,000 their first year and then $25,000 the second year. It's an incredible case study. And now what we're really going to dive into is how can you, based on what you've heard, actually do the same thing at your organization. And so these 5 practical steps are really going to help you dive into being successful as you try to implement peer-to-peer fundraising in your organization. So the first step is pre-planning your peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. And so I want to bring this back up because I think I'm going to pull this back up often throughout the rest of the presentation because I think it's important to remind ourselves as we think through planning and promoting and recruiting in a way that makes sense as kind of a part of this process that we've designed. And so this first step is really prior to this. You're planning your campaign, but you're thinking about it in a way that is in line with this 3-step methodology. So the 4 questions that we think you really should consider before diving in is number 1, what do you want to do? So in the Motherhood Collective's case, they really wanted to figure out how they could inspire their community to become advocates for their cause. And what that really meant to them was that they needed to raise money. So the first year they tried to raise $10,000. The second year they tried to raise $20,000. First year they came up a little short, but they were able to build the groundwork. So the second year they came back to do a campaign, they were able to increase their funding by 4 times. So instead of $6,000, they raised $24,000, which is incredible. So you have to think about, what do you want to do? How much money are you trying to raise? What are our goals? In their case, they were really trying to say, how do we actually turn the community that we've inspired to become volunteers to inspire them to become fundraisers or advocates for their cause? And so they had to think through that. And so that was a goal of theirs. And so then they kind of boiled that down to funding goals. But one of their other big goals was, how do we actually build a fundraising campaign that we can run year over year in a way that helps us build momentum and turn our community into advocates for our cause? And then the 4th question, which I think is important, and it kind of seems like, well, duh, I get it. We need to figure that out. But it's so important. Who is in charge of this thing? So many times when I was working in nonprofits or consulting nonprofits, they didn't know the answer to that question. Or nothing got done, or it got done kind of, below par, or like not really up to standards, because there was confusion on who is actually driving this. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we dive through. So one of the first things you want to do is be able to write a compelling fundraising appeal. So again, if you go back to the methodology, it's all about inspiring your community to become supporters of your cause. And so when you're planning your peer-to-peer fundraising campaign, you have to connect your goals and objectives with your supporters. What do they care about? Why do they care about this? What about the change that you're trying to make in our world matters to them? And why should they care? Who would care if you didn't show up to work tomorrow? Again, just because you want to raise money doesn't mean you have a case to raise money. What you have to do is you have to connect your goals and objectives with your supporters' goals and objectives. And that really comes in the form of a fundraising appeal, or in some organizations, you might call this the case of support. In other organizations, you might call this the campaign story. And really what all of those words mean is, what is the rally cry for our entire campaign? And so what we think is that in a day and age where we're all about relationships, and we prioritize recommendations and referrals over really pretty much everything. I don't know the last thing I purchased something or went on a vacation or went to a restaurant without checking to see what other people said about it. And so it didn't matter that the restaurant said that they were the best in class, or that they had the best sushi or the best Mediterranean food. What I really cared about was people that experienced that. What did they have to say about the organization? And typically what they'd said, the ones that were fueled with excitement, that were remarkable, were the ones that were told in the form of a story. And the reason stories are so powerful is because stories connect us. So if I'm thinking about going to a restaurant, I can actually put myself in the reviewer's shoes as they're saying, I walked into the restaurant, I was greeted by a smile that was kind. Um, the smell and the environment reminded me of my childhood. I can walk along with that person. And I think, yeah, that's for a restaurant. But that's exactly what we're trying to do as a fundraiser, is to be able to tell a story that's compelling, that really connects people to your cause, that helps them see why this change that you're trying to make in our world is important. And that's powerful through the use of stories. And so we feel like a good story really puts a face behind your campaign. It draws your supporters in and emotionally connects them with your cause. And it shows the donor how they fit into the story. It's really what inspires them to want to become a supporter as part of this story, as a part of your campaign. The next thing you really need to do is plan your timeline. And so the most successful campaigns we've seen over the past 7 years have a clear timeline of activities pre-planned throughout the campaign. This will ensure you and your team know exactly what will happen when and by whom throughout the campaign. And so this actually ensures that you can maintain momentum. So, but at the beginning, you're planning for success. And if you're going to plan for success, you need to plan through. Um, it's not just up until, so a lot of individuals will say, I launched my peer to peer campaign. It's the best. It flaked out. It ran out of steam. It got a flat tire. Those are things that we hear all the time. And what's interesting about that is it comes back to planning. And so you as a fundraiser really need to be the chief driver of planning. And so even if you're a fundraising associate or a fundraising coordinator, you really need to drive the importance of fundraising involving planning. So it's very key and clear how someone and what someone's going to do. And what that also does is it showcases the inventory of assets you need to be able to be successful and to acquire prior to launching your campaign. So if you know you need to send an email out 3 days after your campaign launches, it's important to know that someone has to actually write that email. And so by preparing that ahead of time, you'll be able to know exactly what you need to be successful. Someone just asked if I could put this slide back up. Just as a reference, I'll actually be sharing the entire slide deck with you and the recording of this presentation after the presentation so that you can dig through it, you can reference the slides, and so no worries if you don't catch all the details. You'll have the resources so that you can dive back through. So the next stage of running a successful campaign is really about recruiting personal fundraisers. And so we feel like there's 5 ways to do this. And so this is really about activating. So how do you actually activate supporters to become fundraisers? And so the first circle of influence that you really should reach out to is your most loyal supporters. In most cases, the people serving on your board, act as your organization's governing body, but also your biggest supporters. They really care about your cause and believe in it. And so it's important to think about how you can activate them to also become fundraisers. We believe that when planning a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign, it's always best to start by recruiting your board members first. Other organizations, it might be the board members, it might be a fundraising council, it might be a group of people that you've designated as kind of like core advocates or those that are the most engaged donors. And so reaching out to those individuals is kind of the second circle of influence when we talk about where should you or who should you reach out to in your supporter base that you can activate to become fundraisers. The third group is people from your social media community. The great thing about people that are already engaging you in social is that they are already behaving in a way that's going to help them become a successful fundraiser and lead them to becoming an advocate for your cause. They're already staying connected to their friends and family. They're leveraging digital tools to be able to amplify what they're sharing. They have a following, they have a community. And so being able to tap into those that are already supporting you by connecting with you and your cause on social media like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, you can actually activate from there and those become great fundraisers for your organizations and ultimately advocates for your cause. The fourth place that you can really go is email promotion. So thinking through your contacts, figuring out how to be what really qualifies as someone you think would be most likely in your supporter base to become a fundraiser, and you can actually send out emails to them. So not to everybody, because not every supporter is going to become a fundraiser. It's similar to how every donor that gives to you isn't going to become a major donor. And so you need to think well about, what's their affinity to your organization? What's their propensity to really want to dive into fundraising? And then also, what is their capabilities? Certain generations are more likely to want to dive into something like peer-to-peer fundraising because they're more familiar with this. We look at millennials, and we've done a lot of reviews of reports that talk about millennials in a way that says they're a great candidacy for becoming fundraisers for your cause, but you actually have to activate them. They're not going to become that naturally. Some may, but if you don't systemize and create a campaign that's actually going to invite them in, they might go elsewhere because others are inviting them in to do something for the organization. The last kind of ring of influence that you can do as you think well about leading or recruiting fundraisers for your cause is through word of mouth. And so once you've gone through those 4 circles of influence and you kind of dig into the 5th circle, what that can do is actually asking the first 4 circles participants, those that have stood up and said, yes, I want to be activated, how can you ask them to actually identify others in the community or other supporters that you can then invest in and activate as well? So we've talked a little bit about how you pre-plan for your campaign. It's all about crafting a compelling fundraising appeal. We've talked about how and planning a timeline is really important. Thinking well about what is the story behind your cause. We've also then really talked about, how do you actually identify supporters that you can activate to become fundraisers. So this next part of the process is really about how do you actually launch your campaign. So once you've activated your supporters, how do you actually roll this out? What role can you play in actually being a part of the launch? So the first day of your peer-to-peer fundraising campaign is really exciting. You're really bringing this message to the world. Your supporters your fundraisers are really starting to activate their networks, and you're starting to see how the people fundraising way is really paying off. And so again, this is just about you making sure that you're clear with your communication. And so that's by making sure you clearly communicate your story and provide easy ways for people to be activated to join your cause. So when we were talking about recruiting supporters to become fundraisers prior to the launch of your campaign, that's kind of the intentional work that you do before you launch your campaign. Once you launch your campaign, there is going to be others that want to get behind your cause that you didn't initially reach out to. And so making sure it's very clear on your campaign of how someone can get involved is super important. Also, there's others that want to be activated to become fundraisers in a way that's not them creating a personal fundraising page. Maybe it's just them sharing the campaign, and that's great. And so making sure it's easy for your campaign to be shared with others is super important. And so if you see the Justice Movement, they're an organization that chose CauseVox to help power their peer-to-peer fundraising. They actually make it very easy through our tools to ensure that people know exactly how to make a donation, how to create a fundraising page, and how to share. So you can see that all right here on their campaign page. It's very clear what their goals are. It's very clear what they're trying to communicate, what they're fundraising and rallying people behind. And then they also use the power of video to communicate their fundraising appeal, their case of support. The other role that you have is to keep the momentum going. You can't just set it and forget it. Once you've launched, you need to reiterate your message by sending out regular updates on all your communication channels. You can fuel the main story by sharing examples. So in some ways, the main storyline of this presentation is that the world we fundraise in is fundamentally different. And that difference is moving from renting attention and which was about budget and reach, to a world where building relationships through trust and loyalty is key. And then instead of just me telling you that and leaving you out to dry, I used the Motherhood Collective as an example. And so I was trying to keep the momentum going of the presentation. And so, likewise, as you think well about your fundraising campaigns, you want to identify ways that you can keep the momentum going. Stories that personal fundraisers share can actually help fuel the community as well. So, as your fundraisers are, or as you activate fundraisers and they tell you, the world, why they care about your cause, you can also then use that as fuel to inspire others. The third thing you really need to do after you launch your campaign is monitor your fundraisers campaigns. And so the only way to know how your campaign is going is really to keep a close eye on it. And so you as a fundraiser, even though you're empowering others to fundraise on behalf of your cause and help make the change in the world that you're trying to make, you still need to be kind of behind them, be a guide, kind of be that Yoda figure where you're really kind of going with them on this journey to help them be successful. You're the expert. Most of the people that are going to be activated are first time fundraisers. They don't do this for a living. And so you can really share your knowledge with them so that they can be more successful in what they're doing. The other thing you can do is really support your supporters. And so what this really means is, how do you actually get behind those that are fundraising for your cause, but not having as much success? Maybe they need some encouragement. Maybe they need to be encouraged to kind of push forward. Maybe you can give some ideas on how they can really think differently about their campaign. And in some ways, you can even share some of the similar ideas that I've presented to you, because what I'm trying to do is say, hey, you've hit a roadblock and you're trying to raise more money for your organization and recruit and acquire more supporters for your cause. Maybe there's other ways to look at it. And we think that's the people fundraising way. But you, as a fundraiser in your campaigns, can actually replicate that as you support your supporters. Hopefully that makes sense. The fifth thing that you can do, which I think is super important and something that is often forgotten, is actually connecting with new donors. And so naturally through this, you're actually going to expand your community because you have advocates that are going out and inspiring people in your community to become supporters. And so as your supporters grow, one thing you want to make sure is clear is that you care deeply for them. You're thankful they're there. Us humans are drawn to community. We're drawn to others. And I think it's important to make people feel as though they're necessary. I was working on some teaming workshops recently, and one of the ideas behind building a solid team is making sure that if all the team members know that if they don't show up, it impacts the whole team. Like if John decides to flake out on us, it matters. If Sally decides to take it easy and let John and the rest of the team handle it, it matters. And so as you're designing this group of advocates that are fighting with you for your cause, it's important to make sure those people feel necessary. They feel welcome. They feel a part of it. And so it's your job to really do that through thanking them promptly and communicating them with them regularly. Again, your most recent donors or your most recent supporters that are joining behind your cause are the most likely to move quickly from being a supporter to a fundraiser to an advocate. They were inspired. The excitement's high. And so it's a great opportunity for you to thank them and then say, hey, you can actually do more. You can activate them to become fundraisers and then ultimately advocates for your cause. And so it's an incredible opportunity for you to actually amplify the impact of your campaign. So the last thing we're going to talk about today is really about how to actually promote your peer-to-peer campaign. So this is great. We've talked about this, but how do you actually promote your campaign? How do you as the fundraiser help fuel your campaign so that it reaches more of the community, not just the community that you know, but the community that cares about your cause? So how do you help fuel that? Again, these are just really reminders, but effective promotion really includes emotional stories. It includes a clear impact, an urgent need, a specific ask, and campaign consistency. And multiple channel is the most effective. And when you're thinking about how you can promote your campaign, It's really important to maintain consistency no matter how your campaign's being communicated. And I think a great example of this is in the case of if you're running a fundraising campaign and one of your major donor reps go out or your executive director goes out and talks to a major donor about the campaign, and me as the fundraising coordinator maybe sends an email out to some of our supporters, and then the social media coordinator, or maybe you're the same person in all these cases. I know many of you are one team fundraising shops. You need to make sure the message is consistent. And so with smaller organizations, this is great because typically it's the same person actually telling the story, sharing the campaign, promoting it. But as you grow your organization or even increase the amount of channels that you're communicating with, whether it's email or social or direct mail or face to face visits, you still need to make sure that the story is consistent. So by having a clear, compelling story and clear objectives and goals, you can ensure that your team communicates to your community in a way that makes sense and is consistent. One of the biggest, most powerful tools we think is out there today, even inside or even in kind of today's increased competition for attention, is email marketing. It's more powerful than you think. It actually has a huge ROI when you really dig into the value of email. And what we see is that there's four components of a successful email. It's all about targeting, and then the subject line, and then the call to action, and then the content, and then the call to action. And I'm going to break that down for you a little bit further. So the first step is all about targeting or segmentation. And what I mean by this is that it's not about email blasting everybody in your community. That is not the most effective strategy. If that's all you can do, then do that. However, if you want to effectively leverage email as part of your promotion strategy, it's all about thinking well about who you're sending that communication to. It's about thinking, what's the relationship that I have with that person? How did they give to me? What did they give to? Why did they give? Taking those into consideration when you communicate is the difference between the direct response mentality, which is basically like, I'm going to send an email that outlines my case of support to as many people as possible, and I'm going to expect a 5% return. And that's satisfying to me. That is renting attention. We do not believe that's effective anymore. Considering, hey, we met these people at an event. They were inspired by this story about Camellia, who was a little girl in the community. They were really excited about kind of the digging water wells in a community or serving food at a food bank or whatever the case was. But how do you actually package your new campaign into the context of the relationship you have with them? That's personal, that's human. And that's what's going to drive success in the ecosystem we live in today. The second thing is the subject line. So the subject line is kind of like one of my pet peeves because I think it's so under valued and underweighted in the equation. However, it's actually the front door into your emails. Gone is the day that everyone who receives an email opens it. They have to start prioritizing. And the only thing they have to prioritize is the from name and the subject line and maybe some preview text. But this is the front door. It's like when you go in the mall or go to kind of a shopping plex and you look into a store and you look in, all that you can see is what you can see from the front windows. And so if you neglect those, if you leave a smudge or you throw something up last minute, do you think people are going to walk into your store? And I think that's why the subject line is so important to me and something that I kind of hype on a little bit overly, is because it is that front window. It's the window into your communication, into your appeal. And so there's four ways that we've seen you can leverage this effectively. And there's probably many more. And I would love to hear feedback afterwards of what you found is effective for you and your organization. But the first is keeping it short. The second is not overusing capital letters. Third is posing a question. And then the fourth is maybe personalizing it. So if I'm going to send you an email, Elizabeth, who's one of the participants on the call today, and I said, "Hey, Elizabeth, this is Noah. Um, Thanks for attending that event, or our 5K last month. The impact of that was incredible." If I wanted to communicate that message and then say, "Hey, Elizabeth, we're running a new campaign where we're actually going to, instead of just helping one community, we're going to help 3 communities this year. Uh, I think you would be a great fundraiser for our cause. You could create your own page and you could share this out with your community because you've shown that you're excited and passionate about the work we're doing here and the change we're trying to make in our world." All she might see is the first part of that. And so you can actually use her name in the subject line in a lot of cases using email software. Where you can say, "Hey, Elizabeth, thanks for coming out to that 5K last April." And that's a great way. It's like, "Hey, well, yeah, totally. I want to read that. That's human. They've connected with me. They know who I am." In our inboxes and in our mailboxes, there's a sea of people that are that have rented our attention and know nothing about us. And so, how you differentiate yourself is recognizing that the person receiving an email is a person. And they expect that someone emailing them knows who they are and knows why they're emailing them and is going to communicate something of value to them. And so the subject line is the first step into that. And so that really leads into the email content. And so one of the things we see is that, again, you want to bring that personalization through, but also then start beginning to unpack what your case of support is, what the story is, who and what you're helping, why the campaign is vital to make the change that you're fighting for in the world, and how your donor actually, or how the person receiving it, the supporter, the person and part of your community, uh, plays a role in that change. And I think your content can help paint that picture. The fourth thing is really just making the call to action clear. A lot of times it's not clear when I receive emails from nonprofits. I was a victim of this, or not victim of this, I was a perpetrator of this in some ways when I would send out emails and have 3 or 4 call to actions because I wanted to make sure I was serving everybody and being like, "Oh, well, if you don't want A, we have B. If you don't want B, we have C. If you don't want C, we have D. If you don't want D, we have A and B." That's not clear. Tell me what you want to do. Be honest. Don't beat around the bush. Just be clear. And I think that's what is powerful through email is telling a compelling case and then telling people what you want them to do, what you're inviting them into. A lot of people see fundraising as kind of sales and trying to convince people to do anything. You're not. If you take that approach, you're not going to be successful anyways. And so what I see it as is fundraising is more about extending an opportunity for something that they might already be interested in, and you're giving them the opportunity to take action against their interest. And we all are looking for opportunities to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And so I think being clear about what that is for your cause and your campaign is super important. The final thing, which we don't really have time to dive into, but again, I'm going to be sending the slides out to you and the recording, is social media. So I'm going to touch on this a little bit, but there's a lot more in here that you can really dive through when you have time to review the presentation after when I send it to you. And so a lot has changed in 15 years. None of these platforms existed 15 years ago. And more than half of social media users discover social initiatives or causes or nonprofits via social media. And I think what's interesting about this stat is it's probably more than that now because social media has become kind of one of the default search engines for people to find things that other people like them are interested in. Again, if I'm a certain type of person and I have friends that I'm a part of, I'm trying to say like, "Oh, people like me do things like this." And so when I'm searching for social initiatives or I'm thinking well about how I want to be a part of something bigger than me in the world, I might look to my friends on social media. And so I think that's why that stat's so interesting. And of that, more than 64% of social media users actually said that they gave to nonprofits in the last year. So social media isn't this pool of people that just want to connect and just want to talk and share cat videos. There is that. But they're also passionate people. They're relational people. They're people that care about others. They're people that are trying to communicate, trying to connect. And so it's natural that they would want to be involved in a cause. And so what we see is that the biggest problem with social media is people want to try to take a renting attention budget and reach mindset, a direct response mindset to social media. And so they're like, it doesn't work. We can't raise money on it. It's a waste of our time and we're going to cut it. The problem is that they just don't understand the world we live into today. And maybe some of you are that. And if you're offended by that, I'm sorry, but it's true. Social media was never designed to be another mailbox you just dump your stuff into and hope someone responds. That's not an effective way to use the medium, and it was never designed to do that. It was designed to connect people. And by connecting, it's about conveying things that are authentic, emotional, compelling, interesting, unique, and that are relatable. And so it's more about the inspire part. That's your role on social media. You can use it to inspire your community to become a supporter. And what that might mean initially is for them to get involved, to follow your content, to be excited when you share stories. And then by using more stories, you're actually going to inspire them to be a supporter in a different way by maybe giving a donation. And then you can try to activate them through other means to become a fundraiser, to become an advocate for your cause, rallying them together to actually inspire people in their community because people value what they say about you more than what you say about you. And that's how you really build momentum. And that's why we believe so passionately in the people fundraising way, because it works. And we've seen it work. And the people like Lauren and Maria, the Motherhood Collective, are seeing that play out and seeing a new life be breathed into their cause and their community. And they see people getting excited. And it's all about stories. It's all about people connecting, and more people on social media donate because of stories, because that's what motivated them to make a donation. So there's tons of examples in here that I'm going to share. There's also a set of other opportunities that you can use to help promote your cause that we can't get into today, and I didn't expect us to, but I wanted to put them in the presentation because I think they're valuable. Things like social advertising, things like PR and media, things like partnerships. But at the end of the day, I want to come back to 3 points. And so if you hear nothing else from today's presentation, I would love for you to hear this, is that in the increased world of chaos that we live in, where everything's changing all the time, rapidly, it's more important than ever just to be human. And to do that in a way that is about building relationships. And that's why we believe so much in this model. It's also about telling stories worth sharing. And the last thing is you really have to empower your supporters to do something for your cause. And so we believe that it's all about this idea of inspiring your community, activating your supporters, and rallying your fundraisers to become advocates so that they can inspire your community to become supporters. And you can build sustainability out of this. It all starts on empowering your supporters to do something. So that's kind of the scope of the presentation today. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was clear, and I hope it was practical. Again, I'm going to try to dive into some questions now so that I can be helpful to you as you kind of think through this and how it applies to your organization. Also, in about 5 or 10 minutes, Rob, who's the CEO of CauseVox, is going to join us, and he's actually going to give a full demo of how you can take everything we talked about in the presentation and turn it into practice by using our fundraising tools to help power that. And so we didn't design fundraising tools just because we wanted to capitalize on this. CauseVox started because our founders were passionate about a cause and wanted to do something about it, and realized that this model, the people fundraising way, was the best way to do it, and the tools didn't exist for them to do that well, and so they created CauseVox. And so what we've been doing for the past 7 years is really coming alongside causes, fundraisers who are trying to fight for a change in our world that matters, and help them implement this new way forward that's all about building relationships through trust and loyalty. So I'd be happy to answer your questions, but then stick around. Rob's going to really dive into this and help you see how you can practically run a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign in today's kind of complex ecosystem. So let me dive into some of your questions. Thank you guys for spending time with us. I think it was incredible that you guys are giving up some of your time, because I know how valuable that is to learn and to think well about how you can plan an effective and successful peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. So one of the questions I see here is from Malik, and he says, what is the ideal duration of a peer-to-peer campaign? One of the things that I didn't talk about in the presentation that I really should is that there's different types of peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns. So there's peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns that are kind of date driven. So it's like, hey, we're going to run a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign from December 1 through December 30th. And so that's kind of a time-based campaign. There's also like one-day campaigns like Giving Tuesday, which is coming up on November 28th. We're going to say, hey, for 24 hours, we're going to rally around this specific need, and we're going to inspire and activate and rally supporters around this so that we can really raise money for a specific cause. Great opportunity to use peer-to-peer fundraising. But then there's also other forms of peer-to-peer fundraising that are tied up in events. So things like 5Ks, things like races, where you're going to have a race, and prior to that, you actually empower the people that are going to participate in that event to fundraise leading up to it. It's a great way to kind of drive both online and offline participation in your cause. And then the last way is really kind of a year-round, what's sometimes referred to as like a DIY fundraising camp or a peer-to-peer campaign. And that really is basically allowing your supporters all year round to fundraise on behalf of your cause. So not limiting it to you running one campaign during the spring or one campaign during the fall, but rather empowering them to do something throughout the year. So maybe it's for their birthday, maybe it's for kind of a religious holiday, maybe it's for a school project. Whatever it is, you're really enabling them and empowering them to fundraise for your cause at any point in time. So that's just the same thing. You still have to plan well about that, think who you're going to invite into it. And so the same methodology really applies. Rachel says, how do you share this sort of information with people whom have been in fundraising businesses for a long time and don't necessarily take part in trainings, like bosses? And Rachel, the problem of the boss is always a problem. And I think the challenge is that I hope that there's a lot of value in this presentation that you could present to them. And I think what I've seen is that if you blend strategy, which is basically saying, how do we fund our programs, not just this year, but ongoing? How do we acquire more donors? And then how do we do that in a way that's uplifting to the work that we're doing, and we do it systematically? And so we actually designed that kind of methodology, that three-part methodology, the people fundraising way, so that you can kind of show that to your boss and be like, hey, like the world we live into is changing. Like you talk about that all the time. Here's some stats to back that up. Did you know 85% of people actually prefer to be asked to donate by a friend? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And then there's this new way that we can, not even new way, it's actually like, I think what fundraising was actually designed to be originally. We just kind of ruined it with direct response because we took advantage of people because, there was a limited amount of feeds. And if you could dump your stuff into them, it works. It's kind of like what big brands have done with advertising. And so I think some of the tools that are in this presentation would be helpful. Rachel, I would also encourage you to listen to Rob's presentation and then follow up with Rob after the fact, because if you can, we'd love to talk with you and kind of coach you through that personally as well. Michael asks, is it valuable to break up a larger goal into three smaller campaigns? I think that really depends on kind of the timing and need of your goal. At the end of the day, like you said, $150,000, maybe we should run three $50,000 campaigns that are more achievable. I think the problem is if that breaks down the story of why you need the money, that's when I would say it wouldn't be valuable. However, if you can say, hey, we need $150,000 to raise this year, we're going to run all these campaigns. And so this campaign is actually going to allow us to accomplish a third of the impact. And you can kind of bring that impact to light. So maybe, normally you help, 100 different local schools with reading programs, and that then helps, 1.5 million kids or whatever. If you can actually backtrack out that impact that you have into smaller chunks, and you don't lose the integrity of the case or the fundraising appeal, then it's a great strategy and it's a good thing to test out. Hey, Lynn, you said you want to use peer-to-peer funding for monthly giving campaigns. Do you think that will work? It's definitely an option. One thing that we've seen is that if you want to run a monthly giving campaign with peer-to-peer, is to only focus on that. A lot of organizations are like, oh, I want to throw monthly giving into the campaign, where it's like, oh, we're going to say, oh, they can donate, they can give monthly, they can do this. The challenge with that is then you're diluting the message and again, making the call to action unclear. And so I think if you're going to try to run a peer to peer campaign for monthly giving, focus only on monthly giving. And it sounds like that's what you're thinking through, Lynn. And I would highly recommend kind of isolating it and testing it out and then telling us how it goes. We'd love to hear about that. Elizabeth says, what is the strategy for inspiring people to fundraise for their own organization? Um, do you mean people that work there, Elizabeth? Could you clarify the question a little bit? And then we can dive back into it. So someone asks, how do you really like inspire people to get behind your cause when it seems as though the cause really isn't resonating? I think I'm representing your question well. I think your name's Arlene. If I got that wrong, I apologize. I think it's a great question. I think it goes back to really focusing in on those that support your cause already and figuring out ways to slowly grow your supporter base methodically. And I think what's interesting is there's a lot of like desire to have kind of like flash in the pants type campaigns where all of a sudden you raise $50,000. And so we're looking for big wins. But I think most of fundraising is actually about really small wins. And so the fact that you got 8 people to recruit, or you got 8 people to actually say they'll fundraise for your cause is a great starting point. Even though they didn't really raise that much money, I'm just reminded of the Motherhood Collective and Lauren Maria. They set out to raise $10,000, and they, ended up recruiting 23 people. Maybe only 10 to 15 of those were actually active fundraisers, and they raised $6,000. So that was a huge win for them because they didn't expect to raise 10, and so six was huge. But I think what was bigger than that, and they saw that this year, was that that was just building a foundation for future years. And so they were able to go back to those 23 people. They were able to go back to the 104 supporters. They were able to tell them how much they mean to the campaign and show them the impact and inspire them in a new way to actually help fuel and amplify the campaign again. People like being a part of things that are successful. And so the thing is that there's a ripple effect to building kind of cumulative advantage over the years. And so I know it's kind of a grind, but if you believe in your cause enough to do that, that's really kind of the approach. There's no kind of, oh, I raised $100,000 or I raised $50,000. There's no quick wins on this. And I know that might not be the most encouraging thing, but I think what is encouraging is the fact that like small things, small investments, especially in our relationship economy, um, actually have huge payoffs that are more valuable than just 1 year or 3 years. When I was running fundraising and growth for an organization, we were able to figure out that the value of every supporter we had, based on averages and whatnot, was like 4.5 years. And so even though a donor might only give us like 20 or $30 on their first gift, the value of us acquiring that new donor was huge. You could do the math. 30 times 4 years is significant. Um, but I think what we were able to do was build up a base of supporters slowly. And every year we saw that grow and grow and grow and grow. And so we saw 10% growth, 15% growth, 10% growth, 15% growth, 30% growth. So that starts rippling effect. And I think especially when you have smaller organizations to start, like the Motherhood Collective, you actually start seeing those results more. And so they went from 6,000 to 24,000 with tons more participators, or tons more fundraisers, tons more advocates, and tons more supporters. And so it's just a grind. Hey, Elizabeth, that's a great question. So I think the question I asked, and so this is what the Motherhood Collective did. So most of the people that they actually they activated from their supporter base were people that had actually benefited from the outcomes of the organization. And I think the question becomes is, you have to paint a story. We have some examples on our website. If you look up brand script, it gives you kind of a way to tell a story that leads people on a journey to see what success looks like. And then if you don't have success, like what failure looks like. And one of the questions I always ask organizations when they're trying to design and build their stories is like, if you went away, who would care? And why would they care? What would they miss out on? And really start identifying your value proposition. Because then what you can do is you can actually infuse your story with the value proposition so that it really resonates with the audience you're trying to connect. And so if you have people that are a part of your arts community, they need to see why if they don't get behind your cause and see themselves as an essential part, the platform or the opportunity that you create for them won't exist. And so I think it's kind of getting behind and figuring out how to tell that narrative in a way that is really effective. Okay, that's all of the time we have for questions today. I believe Rob has already joined us, but he's actually going to dive into how you actually turn what we've talked about today into practice using Cosvox's online fundraising tools. Rob?
Hey, Noah. Thanks for an amazing presentation. And also thanks so much for everyone here that was able to attend and also just share some of our fundraising insights. In the next few minutes, what I want to do is just share with you a little bit about taking some of these tips, taking some of these strategies that Noah has talked about, and really turning it into action. So just to kind of drive it home, what we've been seeing is that there's been a great shift away from just being about direct response when it comes to peer-to-peer fundraising and moving towards what we call people-based fundraising. So when you practice all of these tips, all these techniques, planning, recruiting, launching, and promoting your peer-to-peer campaign, you're going to make your supporters happy. And in turn, you're going to make their friends and family happy. So in turn, you'll get more donations and traffic to your campaign site. So with Cosvox, what we are is we're an online fundraising platform for nonprofits. What this really means for you is that you can easily use Cosvox to launch your peer-to-peer fundraising campaign in just a few minutes. Today we heard about Noah about planning, recruiting, launching, and promoting a peer-to-peer campaign, and all this goes all in together to put on a successful peer-to-peer campaign. And I understand that it's a lot. It's a lot to do. It's a lot to plan for. It's a lot to digest. It's a lot to get your team on board. But when it comes to actually implementing your peer-to-peer campaign, one of the things that we try to solve is around how you can take everything that you learned, all the strategies, all the best practices, and how you can launch it online. End of the day, my goal is to take away your headaches when it comes to running a peer-to-peer campaign by making the technology easy without having to expand your budget or headcount, so that the only thing you have to do is focus on fundraising. So at Cosvox, that's what we do. We have a better way to fundraise online, and we help you launch a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign in minutes. And you can do everything from start to finish on our platform. Everything from creating your campaign sites, your peer-to-peer campaign sites, all the way to getting your supporters to create personal or team pages, all the way to automating your back office, so it saves you time, so you can focus more time on coaching, more time on storytelling, and more time on fundraising. So with Cosvox, you can easily do that. We did hear about the Mudhead Collective several times by Noah in some of the examples, and they ran a peer-to-peer campaign site on Cosvox quite successfully, as well as some other examples as well. So with Cosvox, what you can do is you can easily launch a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign in just a few minutes. So when you first start, you can easily get set up. There's no coding required, there's no IT required, and there's no developer required. So instead of having to hire a designer developer to customize your peer-to-peer campaign, you can easily do this on the Cosvox platform without needing to know how to code. And one of the parts of making a successful peer-to-peer fundraising campaign is around that storytelling. And storytelling really revolves around a couple of different things. There's the actual content and stories that you share, like the videos and blog posts and impact stories and social media posts. But also the other part of it is around the visual branding, the aesthetics and the look and feel of your peer-to-peer campaign site. So instead of directing your donors and supporters to a third-party generic campaign site, you can actually run your own peer-to-peer fundraising campaign that looks like and feels like your brand and your organization all on CauseVox. So for example, the Butter Collective, they use their own custom URL. You can easily do that on our platform. So your donors, supporters don't know that they're on causevox.com. And then you can easily change the look and feel of it as well. So with that, you can support visual storytelling. You can easily change this without having to dive into HTML or CSS. So there's no coding required, just easy setup. There's no web designer required as well. Now, when it comes to running a peer-to-peer campaign, we actually see CauseVox as your destination, because what you want to do is move away from this transactional focus that's all about just driving donations to a donation page. And that's not really effective. That's not what donors really want. What donors actually want is they want to be immersed in the story that they believe in, and they want to support that story for impact. So with this, you can treat your CauseVox campaign site as a destination for your fundraising. So what this really means is that people can browse your CauseVox campaign, they can read the stories, they can read the impact that you're having, as well as what they then can do is they can take part of being a part of that impact by donating, by joining, by sharing the campaign. So storytelling is integrated with CauseVox as a destination, but on top of that, we also focus in helping you tell stories. So when it comes to running a peer-to-peer campaign, instead of just directing people to the same page over and over again, you can actually post blog posts and stories directly onto your CauseVox campaign site. So let's say you're about to reach your goal, and you can easily post a story, and then you can blast that out goal to your social channels as well as to your supporters so that they can share that with their networks. So this way, it becomes about unfolding the narrative, about telling the story, about getting people to share on social media as well as the email, so that you guys can drive more traffic and donations to your peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. When it comes to getting people to create personal fundraising pages, we also make it really easy as well. So not only are there individual personal pages, but also there's the ability for you to do team pages as well. So it's easy for them to get set up, because when you run a peer-to-peer campaign, the last thing you want to worry about is customer support from your individual fundraisers who are asking you to set up their page on their behalf, or they can't get started. So we make it really easy for all your supporters. They just go to your CauseVox peer-to-peer campaign site, they click on create a fundraising page, and what they can easily do is just put in their email address as well as a password in order to go through a 3-step process to create a personal page. Everything's guided, there's no coding required. And essentially what we do is we make it as simple and easy as possible for anyone to create a personal page. So they can fill out the photo, then we pre-fill their pages with a lot of info, including a default fundraising appeal. And all they have to do is just click through a few screens, and then from there, they're presented some sharing options that allow them to share their page on social media as well as on email very easily. And all this is mobile optimized as well, so no matter where someone is, no matter where they are, whether they're in front of a computer, at work, or just on the go, they can easily create a personal fundraising page as part of your peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. On the admin side, what we focus on at CauseVox for you guys as nonprofits is really about helping you easily run a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. So what this means for you is that we have an easy management interface that allows you to manage all of your personal fundraisers, edit their pages, as well as an easy interface for you to go in and look at all your donors as well. So you can manage all your donations, see all the contact info and email addresses, so they can use this for some direct mail solicitations or for some e-blasts. And then you can use this to feed into some of your other fundraising plans as well. On our platform as well, we focus on automating the back office. So for example, one of the things that we have at CauseVox is the ability for you to send automated donation receipts so that you can focus more time on fundraising instead of having to send individual donation receipts that are customized to each individual donor. Lastly, on CauseVox, one of the biggest things that we focus on as well is around our customer service. So what this means for you guys is that with every plan on CauseVox, with every user on CauseVox, we have amazing customer support. So there's real people here at CauseVox based in New York that are here to help you. So whether you need help getting set up, or you need a one-on-one walkthrough, or if you need some one-on-one training, we're here to help. We're on your side. We want to make sure that you're successful when it comes to fundraising. That's why we plan out and do all these peer-to-peer fundraising webinars, as well as Giving Tuesday webinars, and then other fundraising resources. Essentially, we have a whole support team here to help you be successful, and that's part of our mission. Now, if you're looking for more of a detailed walkthrough of CosVox as well as some of our services, feel free to just navigate to our homepage, so cosvox.com. And then other resources over here, there's a link called Request Demo. So if you click on that, and if you fill this out, then what that does is sends me an email directly, and I'll be happy to schedule a one-on-one time with you to go over CosVox, to go over your peer-to-peer fundraising campaign and event that you're trying to accomplish. And then I'll be happy to share some best practices, tips, some recommendations from my own experience doing peer-to-peer fundraising, as well as to walk you through the platform to see how it can help you save time, save budget, as well as help accomplish your fundraising goals. Now back to Noah.
Hey guys, thanks Rob for sharing kind of that overview. And what I love about the work that we do here at CosVox is we don't want to just provide, 1/3 of the solution. What we really want to do is help to provide you all the things you need to essentially navigate the increased chaos that we're all fundraising in. And so that's why we combine this idea of education and knowledge with tools and with support. We feel like those three things together can really help fuel your fundraising success. And so that's why we do this kind of stuff. And so thank you guys for hanging out with us. Again, this presentation is going to be recorded, and the slide decks will be going out to you so you can have all the information. If you have any further questions, feel free to go to cosvox.com and just start chatting with us. We try to be as accessible as possible. We really want to embody kind of what we preach. And so we want to be human. We want to tell stories. We really want to help empower you do things, or empower you to be successful. And so we're excited to help you make the change in the world that you're fighting for alongside you. And so enjoy the rest of your guys' days, enjoy your week, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good day.